Yeah, the book cover was designed by this Irish artist, actually,
Oh, perfect.
whose name I should remember, but he's pretty good.
Yeah, that was great.
You can start when you're ready. So, are we going to have full screen, or what's going to happen here? Okay.
I don't know. Can Jen tell us?
Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
that's it.
That's it. All right. Hi, Carla.
Hi, Joe.
Welcome everybody to Book Passage. It's great to be here. And I'm going to introduce you first, Carla. How about that?
Sounds like
Wonderful, wonderful Carla Malden is here. We'll discuss her new novel, uh, Shine Until Tomorrow. It's her fourth book. Well, one you co-authored with your dad, uh, a novel, Search Heartache, and then a very powerful memoir called After Image, a broken-hearted memoir of a charmed life, extensively published, tremendously successful in the movie business. And it's great to be talking to you again.
it's lovely to be talking to you too. And I want to tell everybody about you. Joe is an award-winning novelist and memoirist and poet, as well as being a well-respected educator. And I believe the founding chair, is that right, of the Simpson Literary Project, which is
Yes.
a remarkable organization that promotes creative writing for high school age students. Is that basically correct?
And we
In Northern
do,
California.
yeah, we give the Joyce Carol Oates Prize. We're at the stage of finalists for the Joyce Carol Oates Prize. It's a $50,000 prize to a mid-career author of fiction, and we have lots of events around all that. So yeah, we have other projects too, but thanks for mentioning that. It's fun. It's a great organization. Love the board, and they better all be on this program right now. That's what I'm saying. So, shall we talk?
Let's talk.
Okay. How shall we begin? Hey, time travel.
Okay.
You've written a time travel novel.
And I am the least likely suspect to have done that. It's never been a genre that I'm particularly drawn to. Uh, it's just that this particular story about this particular young girl had to be told that way. She had to learn certain things in order to evolve as a character and a human being. And the 60s was the place to go to learn them. And the Summer of Love, San Francisco, Haight Ashbury, being the sort of apex of that time and place, was the best possible place for that. So I don't know if I was constrained or liberated. I think probably more liberated by not really being steeped in time travel literature. I don't really know all the tropes that well. So I just worked it out as though it was, any story that needed to be honest and truthful.
So it was driven by a character,
Correct.
the character Mari, who's who is famous for a very witty conversation. The heart of darkness is something that I remember very well from the. So, but let's try to connect this. So it's a story about a teenager, and it's done in time travel. I'm wondering. So I don't know anything. I don't think I know much about time travel either, except there's a way in which all fiction is time travel, forward, back, sideways, moving into different realms of time, characters experienced in time. But the thing about adolescence is that there's something about the project of being an adolescent, finding yourself, and traveling in time. There seems to be a connection, for me anyway, for you too, that
Yes,
she's moving around in time. She finds herself in another
it
time
has
and
to do,
place.
I think, with simultaneously as an adolescent wanting to escape yourself and find yourself, sort of flip sides of the same coin, maybe. I think that she wants to escape these barriers that she has put around herself, between herself and other people. And she also needs to find herself.
Well, and that is the adolescent project, to get outside yourself and teenagers think they're always reinventing the world around them. So she literally does that. We can't there's a lot of there are many opportunities for plot spoilers in this conversation, so I want to be really careful here. I mean when I think about the main problem with time travel narratives, you got to make sure that nobody kills their own grandfather, because then you're in trouble. Then you can't exist anymore. Okay, so I'm not giving away anything. I'm not saying anything, but
And
so
nobody gets
there's
killed. Nobody gets killed anyway.
nobody has. So it's yeah, and so here we are, and we're traveling in time, back in time. And was there something about the 60s, June 1967, that was somehow personal, intensely important for you?
Well, yes and no. I think I just have an affinity for that time. I have an affinity for the music. It just speaks to me. And I think part of that is on a more general level because it was a time of real optimism and idealism and a sense that a single individual could affect change in the world, which I think is something that teenagers are probably and sadly lacking today. So that was part of her journey, was to absorb some of that and bring it back to the present.
Well, maybe the readers would be helped if you sort of set it up a little bit. How did it happen such that she found herself in 1967 from Marin County?
Well, we meet this girl, Mari, who's 17 years old, on the last day of her junior year of high school. And we get to know her. And as Joe was alluding to, her sort of barrage of sarcasm and snarkiness that she uses to separate herself from the world and to buffer the pain of the world. She's the child of divorce. She comes home that day, a variety of things happen. It's supposed to be her weekend with her father. She hears a message on the voicemail to her mother that he can't take her that weekend, and we discover that he's missed her for several weekends, and she's hurt. And she picks a fight with her mother when her mother gets home, and she's afraid to drive. She's a 17-year-old who has not yet gotten her driver's license, and she's afraid to drive, and she's particularly phobic about crossing a bridge, which of course is sort of metaphorical. Bridges between people, all kinds of connection is anathema to her. But she pedals off on her bicycle in a rainstorm and has an accident and bumps her head. And it's a little Wizard of Oz-ish, because when she wakes up, she is not in the Emerald City, but she is in the Summer of Love, 1967, though it takes her a while to figure that out.
Yes, and this gephyrophobia, the fear of bridges, turns out to be not that radically unusual. People seem to have fear of bridges.
Yeah.
And she says at one point about herself, I think, I don't think the narrator says this, that risk taking is anathema to her. And she wants to go to the Ivy League school. She doesn't want an incomplete. That's so all this generates all the the background drama for her search into the past. Um, so I'm just going to go here. I wasn't going to do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. So when she's talking to her dad, who says, "I'm not gonna, I can't see you this weekend," there's the archetypal image of the divorced family, and the mom is a very mom-driven story. At the same time, it's a dad-driven story. Only the dads are a little more about. Anyway, so the dad is saying, "I can't do it," and Mari says, "Well, we spend weekends watching old black and white movies like On the Waterfront." I gotta say, okay, first two times I read it, I said, "Did I wait a second? Was that there the whole time?" Okay, I gotta go there. So was that fun putting in one of your dad's most famous movies?
Yes, it was. It's what do they call that? An Easter egg now?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little Easter egg stuck in there. Yes, it was lots of fun. There are a couple of those about different things, but that was lots of fun.
Was there a Streetcar Named Desire reference in there too? Okay.
No,
Yeah,
different
well,
about different things. But yes, that was great fun.
well then let's do a little writer conferencing talk for a second here, since writers and we're kind of conferencing. So one of the real strengths of your narrative is dialogue. You have control of dialogue, and dialogue's a high art. I mean, for me, Elmore Leonard's, my hero when it comes to dialogue, and there, the first thing a writer learns is you don't ever answer a question. in dialogue. Hey, how you feeling today? Oh, I'm feeling great. That's terrible dialogue. That's never going to work. Okay, so you're really good at dialogue, and so I'm wondering, does this come from your movie experience, your screenwriting, your treatment experience? Does that proceed from that?
Um, yes, probably yes. But the first thing I thought of when you were talking about that was, especially apropos of just bringing up my father and On the Waterfront. When I was a child, I used to cue my father when he was memorizing his dialogue for a movie that he was working on. He always went in letter perfect when they started a movie. And I would go up into his little study and cue him, which for anybody who doesn't know means reading the other parts. And then he would read, he would say his lines. And this has really helped me as a writer. I have very vivid memories of him oftentimes saying to me, scratch that line, I can act it.
Hmm.
In other words, if you can tell it in some way other than dialogue, let the actor act it. So I think I sort of absorbed some of that and translate it into the dialogue really better serve you and really better reveal the character and not just be gratuitous and not just be, how are you? I'm fine. So that was the first thing I thought of. And then in terms of screenwriting, yes, you want the dialogue to be punchy and to indicate the character. You want to be able to read, open a script at random, and this is probably true of a book too. Open a script at random, read a line of dialogue, and know which character is saying it without looking at the name, because they have to have an individual and idiosyncratic way of speaking.
Yeah, that's very cool. Huh. Okay. That's really interesting. So when you're writing a screenplay, as I understand it, it's you can only write what you can see, right?
Yes.
So there's no screen. You're not
Unless you've got voiceover, which I try to avoid.
okay. So and unless you're Tom Stopper, where you can write lots and lots of you know poetry explaining what's going on, it's brilliant stuff. But anyway, so so that takes great discipline to write only what you can see. Now, how does this translate into the art of fiction writing for you? Does it take, is it, do you, does it, is it harder to do that, or is it freeing to say, oh, wait a second, I could get inside somebody's head?
That's it. That's the latter. It's freeing. Absolutely. Um, I think it's Elia Kazan who said that directing, he was talking about directing, is turning psychology into behavior.
Hmm.
So that's very limiting in a screenplay. You have to get the psychology into behavior and dialogue. In a novel, you can this you can have a direct trapdoor into the character's brain. So you can examine the psychology as fully as you like without being restricted by what you see, as you said. So
Okay,
yeah,
well,
I would go with freeing for sure. I have come to enjoy it much, much more than screenwriting, which I did for years and years.
but when Mari and Jimmy and the whole gang is in the world, and the photography teacher and the mom and other family units hanging around, um, you're I don't want to say this. You're you're investigating in narrative all these connections. So it's about family, right? I mean,
Much so.
I mean, and all your other previous work. I mean, it's been about. I want to come back to marriage and to the kind of domestic turmoil, not turmoil, but yeah, well, actually, yeah, in the novel Search Heartache, there's a great deal of dramatic pain. Um, and the memoir too. So, what's your? I mean, is this a family story, or did it come out of you as a family, as a tale of a family?
I didn't conceive of it that way. I really was just focused on her. But I think when you're telling the story of a teenage girl, you really can't separate her out from her family, um, because that's what she's trying to do, is define herself against her family. That's what teenagers do,
Right.
define themselves vis-a-vis their family. So when you're examining her, you really can't separate her out from the family dynamic. And yeah, I think now that you mention it, family does thread through all my work. And it's also very much with Search Heartache. And here too, I am sort of fascinated how within families or within close relationships, people tend to hurt the people and be cruel to the people that they really care the most about. And that's an interesting dynamic to me. That's sort of what drives Search Heartache, the other novel.
Right. So Mari is even sort of conscious of this fantasy about bringing her parents back together. She's, you know, she tries to be sarcastic about it and ironic about it, but she, if she's honest with herself, she would like that to happen.
Right.
And so, so the mom is the mom figure in this novel. So they have a very contentious love relationship. It's pretty deep. It's it's very subtly done and true to life. Um, I'm wondering what's your thoughts about that dynamic?
Well,
What are your thoughts about that?
I have one child, an only daughter, and we have, I got really lucky. We have an amazingly close relationship. So I really didn't pull on that, but I understand mother-daughter dynamics. It's a really fraught and charged relationship. And having been a teenager and had a mother and lots of girlfriends who had mothers, I think I know that relationship and the pitfalls that lie there. And this woman is just, her mother is just trying really to get through the day post divorce. She has a boyfriend, but he's kind of a jerk. And she had to go to work, which is something new for her. And she's just trying to get through the day. And part of Mari, the lead girl's development, is that by the end of the book, and I thought this isn't really a spoiler, but she comes to understand that her parents, and in particular her mother, are individuals. They're human beings distinct and apart from being her parents, which she in the book says she comes to a little late. I think she maybe comes to it earlier than a lot of people who never come to it at all. But she does come to this revelation that her mother has a life and was really doing her best.
Well, and it's interesting being a father. Father-son relationships are very simple. They're uncomplicated. They don't cause any heartache at all. But we can talk about that some other time.
Well, we're
So,
going to get to your book and we'll talk about it
no,
there.
no, no, no. I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that. But the other thing is thinking, the Vietnam War is such a big uh, issue, theme in this novel, and that is, uh, and it was, that's my generation, and so I thought that was, her engagement with that material. I mean, she could sort of be ironic about it. Oh, these people, hippies, protesting and stuff. But I think it sort of woke her up about some deeper issues, which she didn't have from her privileged, entitled life prior.
Right. Well, in fact, that's why, I don't know if you remember, I used the, there are lots of clues that she's gone back in time that she's kind of slow to pick up on. I
Yes.
imagine most readers get it before she does, which I hope is kind of fun.
Yeah.
But the one that sets her over the top where she really realizes it is when she passes by a newspaper stand and the headline has to do with the war in Vietnam. And she knows about Vietnam, but it's a long time ago. The book actually, the present day of the book is 2007. It's not 2021.
Okay.
And she knows Vietnam, but it's generations ago. So she has some misinformation. Oh, I think the war is going to be over soon. I'm not sure, in the way that a kid doesn't, really know that much about it, all the details of it, the particulars of it. So yeah, it's a force in the background.
And so you have all these pop cultural contexts here: the clothes, the hair, the pot, um, the music. The
Music.
title is from a Beatles song. Uh, I mean, the '60s famous for music. Okay, so which came first, the idea, the music for you, or the story about Mari?
Oh, that's really interesting. They're so interwoven in my mind, and they were in the developing of the story. Um, I think the story came first, but there was just something obvious and organic about the fact that once she was back in time, she would fall in with a band, a garage band, that and that would be the most logical group of people. And they were everywhere. They were all over Haight Ashbury, garage band
Right.
in every old Victorian house. And she falls in her, there's a romance and she falls in love with the leader of the band. So they're deeply interwoven. But I would say the story and then the music. But I did think a lot about, if this were going to be a movie, what song would be playing for this and what song would be playing here. And I mean, I did have a soundtrack in the back of my mind.
What's the strawberry song in this?
Incense and
It's
Peppermints.
Incense of Pepper. That's right. Comes up. Oh my God. I hadn't thought about that for a long
Yeah, well,
time.
that was the number one song on the day when she arrives in the past.
Okay.
That was the
Good
number one
knowledge. Good
country.
knowledge. So the title, what's the story behind the title? When did it dawn on you that this would be the title? Come on,
Um,
you got to identify the song too. Everybody knows about
okay,
it.
well, the title is "Shine Until Tomorrow," which is a line from "Let It Be." When the night is cloudy, there is still a light that shines on me. Shine until tomorrow, let it be. And I'm a Beatles person, so it was just the perfect title for this because it's about time, it's about the past, it's about tomorrow, it's about her learning to shine instead of separating herself from the world and being snarky. And for real dyed in the wool Beatles freaks like myself, the interesting underbelly of the title is that Paul McCartney says that, um, not that the song came to him in a dream in the way that Yesterday did, but that his mother came to him in a dream, his long deceased mother, and said,
Ah,
"Let it be." So I liked that the whole concept of the song "Let It Be" came from his dead mother from the past. So sort of a layered thing there.
moms, moms and marriage. Um, oh, before we leave the subject of movies. So who are your favorite directors? I'm not going to ask you who's going to direct the movie based on this novel, but who are your favorite directors? Ilya
Well,
Kazan.
yes,
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of working for him on his last movie, and his movies figured large in my family. So
A genius.
a genius
Yes.
for sure. I personally think nobody worked with actors like he did. So I'd say him. I'd say Stanley Kubrick.
Mhm.
Um, I would say, isn't that horrible? Now I just draw a COVID blank. Um, who else?
So, so the Patty Chayefsky generation of directors.
Yeah, I'm not a big action movie person, so I appreciate Michael Bay and all those people what they can do, but it's not a movie I sit there and thoroughly enjoy for the most part. I like movies about people. I like movies with great performances, and those are a little scarcer
Yeah.
than those directors from a generation or two ago.
One of the sneaky themes in your novel, uh, it's taken me a while to get it, is marriage. Good marriages, bad marriages, happy marriages. And I'm thinking of, what I think was so wonderful about it is I'm thinking of Sonnet 116, Let Me Not to the Marriage of True Minds Admit Impediments, which is a poem we've all been to weddings where someone has recited that. But that poem is actually pretty tricky. And the reason I'm going to quote it a little bit because I want to say something about your book. And that is, love is not love which alters what it alteration finds. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and time, weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. And that's the note that I think your novel bravely confronts, and your work, your writing in general. You go to the edge of doom to be honest about the pain that love implies. Uh, the other side too. So what I find most moving about the Shine Until Tomorrow is that you're dealing with these really huge emotions across generations, and these characters come to life, and the stakes are high. Well, the definition of teenager is that the stakes are always sky high. There's no such thing as low stakes for being a teenager. Well, it turns out that's true of her mom too, and it's true of everybody who's kind of interesting in life. You never there are no short stakes anywhere. Anyway, so I love how it's always to the edge of doom, because without giving away any plot spoilers, I mean, there are scary moments that could have upended everything. And I think that's one of the great achievements of your novel.
Well, thank you very much. I agree entirely about that's the nature of teenagerhood. And that's one of the things I was trying to capture, was that it's it's every moment is agony or ecstasy.
Yeah.
And she, at the beginning, distances herself from the world so that she doesn't have to experience either one of those. And by the end of the story, I hope she's learned that you can't get one without the other, and it's a fair trade.
Well, and what's great is that so photography, makes she learns a lesson from her photography teacher. That's not about capturing somebody. It's about capturing what? How does he put it? How
Got
does
to
he
get
put it?
close to your subject. You have to get close, he says. You have to get
Yeah.
close.
So you're not just taking a picture of something outside yourself. You're trying to see inside something.
Right.
And that's why the Leica camera is almost a character
It is.
in the novel.
Well, we
And
discovered that it's an heirloom as well, which I won't give any spoilers there, but it's,
that
it
was
has,
close. That
it
was
has
very close,
close,
Carla.
but it has history. Well, she says up front that she got it from her father, but and photography was something she shared with him. But it's got history and tradition, and all of that has to do with what you were discussing earlier, with linking her to the past and her family and her roots, which are also something that she's tried to divorce herself from when her parents got divorced.
Right. There's the eternal present when you're a teenager. And it turns out that, I don't know, maybe we never stop being an adolescent in some way. Maybe we never leave high school. That's my personal theory, that we never actually leave high school. We just sort of transfer to another high school along the way until we get it right. Um, anyway, um, I've got a lot of stuff to talk to you about, but oh, well, one last thing. So autofiction, you ever think much about autofiction? People say, hey, this is the Carla Malden story. She's sort of telling the secret of her life here.
I know that's kind of the buzzword right now. I don't think about it until, not with this book, but more with Search Heartache, the previous novel. A few of my friends said to me, I can't believe you wrote that. Or aren't you worried that people are going to think you cheat on your husband and that kind of thing? I thought, no, I made it up. That's why it's called fiction.
That's why it's
So,
fiction.
yeah, it didn't really occur to me until I got a couple of responses like that, which was just so bizarre to me. I think, you know, there's a lot of me in both books. The crazy, neurotic, compulsive threads are pulled in one and in a different way in the other. I mean, I really understand Mari and Shine Until Tomorrow. There's a lot of me there, but on steroids. So I think you start with, it's again, to talk about actors. We're spending some time there this evening, but it's a lot like being an actor. You have to find something in yourself that you can draw on to portray a character. I mean, even if it's a villain, no villain thinks that he's evil. He's got a reason for doing what he's doing. And in my books, well, particularly Search Heartache, she doesn't think she's nuts, even though, and neither do I, frankly, but some people do. And she has a reason for behaving and believing the way that she does.
Hmm. So you're saying that it's universal. These experiences have to
Yeah,
tap into some universal thematic. So
right.
so all happy families are alike. Every unhappy family is unique. Tolstoy said that in Russian a lot better than I
Something
just
like
did.
that. But yeah, no, what do you think about autofiction? I mean, you've written about a big family here that's involved in, has everybody seen Joe's book?
Oh, there you go.
Great book. But it's a sweeping sort of saga about family of, Irish descent. How much, you're obviously not Irish, but how much of that did you draw from your family and your childhood?
Uh, it's interesting that for me, it's interesting that I wrote a couple of memoirs, which I told as much of the truth as I was capable of telling. And I did sort of tell facts about my family. And it's a tough story. And I felt like I was doing therapy on myself. I wanted to send myself a bill at the end of every day of writing. And so the first one was Subway to California. It begins with my father running away because he's being pursued by the FBI. He's a small-time mobster from Brooklyn. And we get to California, of all places in the world, Berkeley. And so for me, my childhood was about the organized crime and the Catholic Church. I was a very devout, pious boy. When I was a young man, I lived in a monastery. I was Brother Joseph. So I've done. My brothers were all in prison. I I was on both sides. My parents were tremendous liars. They were gifted liars, uh, and maybe that's where I learned something about storytelling, if I ever learned anything at all. Because they would always, for them it was a pretty violent world that we grew up in, and I so for me, the church gave me stories, gave me art, gave me music, uh, gave me a reason to live. And then I promptly squandered that when I was in my 20s and 30s, when I got involved in lots of different things and all written about in Technicolor in Subway to California. Uh, Played cards for a living around the world, opened restaurants, developed a few choice habits of my own that I needed to break at some point until one day the fever broke. And that was yesterday, and now I'm talking to you. No, it's a little longer than that. But at some point, I knew that I finished graduate school at Cal, and but I wasn't an academic. But I was interested in teaching. I had a baby when I was 25, and so I'm rambling around here because Good Family Fitzgerald combines two of the themes of my life: the church and the mob. The capo in this, the boss of the Good Family Fitzgerald is a mobster of some power and repute, and he has a very beautiful son who's a charismatic priest. And I think the question readers have sometimes is when they read this novel is, who's the more principled guy? Is it the priest? Is it the mobster? It's a I hope it's a close call. It was for me, a close call to figure out what was going on. So my novels have been either about the church or about the mob, except one novel I wrote about a publishing house that was a millennial female assistant editor, which was the most fun to write, inhabiting the consciousness of a millennial. I could identify because she was a basketball player and I loved playing basketball. So anyway, she was a lot of fun. So I'm rambling. This is a saga. It's long. It took me 8 years. I published 4 books between the time I began it and the time I finished it. I I I don't know. Maybe there's a sequel. It seems to be the stories didn't end. They kept coming. And one of the things that I hear a lot is, well, you have all these this patriarchy. Yeah, it's a lot of patriarchy. But I hope you saw that, the women actually drive this narrative in all sorts of ways.
And are the heroes, the heroines? They are.
They are. They are.
Yes.
which is an Irish American story. No offense to anybody out there, but I mean, Irish and Italians. I mean, I got a lot to say about that. You know, they're
Something you made a remark that both of your parents were extraordinary liars. Do you
yeah,
think that that's what taught you to be a storyteller?
it's possible. It's possible. I began as a poet. It was all I wrote, all I cared about until I was in my 30s. I started, maybe should I write a novel? But I published my first book when I was in my 20s in poetry and when I was at graduate school. So it was always poetry for me. Uh, Fiction was beneath me. I was, uh, you know, in the ether writing poetry, surrealist poetry. Uh, yeah, the lying was exciting. I never could trust my parents. When they died, they both had Alzheimer's. I mean, I was in their alternative universe toward to the end. I was the last kid standing. All my brothers were gone at that point, uh, one way or another. So, uh, where was I going with this? The
Storyteller.
mob. The mob. Oh, it's dysfunctional families. That's it. You know, why use two words? Family. That
It's
says it
redundant
all.
because it's redundant.
Family. We don't need another word there. Uh, well, yeah, but the mob and the church, they're both dysfunctional. The But they're both a romance too. There's a love of the family. Shame and secrecy are what make us Irish. Somebody says in the course
And
of
well, what I also got from it is there's also in both of them a sense of sort of intrinsic order, like the way, even in the mob, very much so, the way things are done.
right.
You
Yeah.
know,
What's interesting for Italian, it's uh, omerta is the you keep quiet, shut your mouth. For the Irish, it's just the opposite. Although I don't even know what that is. So yeah, but the Italian, the Irish invented talking, and the Italians invented never shutting up. They so so they're completely different, totally the same. They so I and one of the main characters, of course, is Francesca, who marries into, she breaks the family line, marrying into the family, and she's a big figure. Anyway, the women taught me a lot in the course of this novel. I didn't know they were going to take over. Of course, I never know when women in my own life are going to take over. They just
but
do.
well, they should. But they do it in sort of a surreptitious way. I mean, it's not you. You have to really think about it to discover that they're really driving the narrative, because the men are the flashier characters in some ways. Maybe not Caitlin, but it's you have to think about it.
Well, there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of sex, interconnected sometimes, not always. There's a there's a car that that they're all sort of in love with, a Maserati, right? Uh, and there's a romance. I mean, a fiction is a romance. It's, if you don't love, maybe you feel this when you're writing. I bet you do. You sort of you fall in love with your characters, especially the flawed ones, the ones that, I mean, that's the crazy thing about fiction. That, well, I learned this when I was writing a memoir about it, and I started writing about this guy I really despised, somebody, a total betrayer. And in the course of writing about this guy, I became more sympathetic. I said, well, okay, maybe he has a point. Maybe I am a jerk. Maybe he was right to go after me. So I think something similar happens with fiction when you begin to take into account all the experience someone you bring to bear to any experience. You see, you know, I mean, we're
Well,
all we're all flawed as hell, every
yeah,
single one of
unlike
us.
in real life, when you're writing a fiction or writing anything, you have to kind of stop and think about motivation. Because apropos of our conversation about dialogue, you don't want to throw in some action that's not true to the character or doesn't serve the story. So you have to think about motivation. So in writing a memoir, you start to think about maybe motivation of people other than yourself, which you normally don't do in your daily life, right?
Right. And I like it that way. No, I'm just kidding. uh, yeah, I think, look, I'll say it again. We're all flawed. I think one of the great moral dimensions of reading and writing is that we explore our our deficiencies, our losses. We can't, if we don't know anybody who's lived a blameless life. We don't know, I never met anybody. Um, we all are guilty. So I sound like a Catholic, which I still am, actually. I don't think I will ever get over that, get over that vision, that myth, that belief. I'm going to stop before I get in any more trouble. Do we have questions here?
We're supposed to go to the bottom of our screen. Do you want to do that? Let's see. What about, okay, I got some. Okay, well, my sweet friend Carol is asking if I could travel, if I could time travel, would you go back to the summer of love or somewhere else in time? I would go back to the summer of love, but now this is going to be so heavily focused on my father that it's almost embarrassing. But my husband and I always say, if we could time travel, we'd go back to the opening night of Streetcar Named Desire on Broadway.
Wow.
And see Marlon Brando step out on that stage for the first time and be the revelation that he was. So that's my number one answer to that. But Summer of Love would be a lot of fun.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. So someone named Busby is asking, can you talk a little about your individual writing processes? When and how and why do you do it? Please, Carla, go ahead.
I'll go. Why do I do it? Basically, it's like that stupid answer that people always use, but it happens to be true because I have no choice, because there's nothing else I can do, and because it's just what I have to do, which is a non-answer, and I'm sorry. What does it say here? When and where and how. I tend to just work as in the actual writing at my little desk on my computer, but I do a lot of percolating during the rest of the day. That's why the pandemic has been tricky, because I'm not out in the world. I'm not driving is a great way for me to percolate. I'm not driving. I'm not doing anything. I take a lot of walks. If I've got a second act problem, I take a walk. And I sometimes, if I've hit a block, I go back. I try not to go back too far, but I do edit myself a little bit as I go along, because that's the fun part for me, is I kind of like polishing. I know most people don't, but I enjoy that. So that'll get the motor running again to go back 10 pages and polish that up. And then I have a head of speed when I get there. And another little trick, for if there are any aspiring writers out there, that works for me, I have no idea if it works for anybody else, is to quit the day's work when you know what comes next, even if it's just the next sentence, because then when you sit down, you've got something to start you off.
That's Hemingway.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, that's a great thing.
Okay.
He stole it from you.
He stole it from me. I'm not a huge fan of Hemingway's. But okay. And you answered that question.
Well, actually, I'll answer it this way. Lately, ever since the pandemic, I've been writing short stories. Now, what's a short story? A short story has more in common with a poem to me than it does with a novel. Maybe it has to do with compression of the narrative. Maybe it has to do with the speed, which something needs to be told.
Of tone, the sort of a uniformity of tone, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, starting a novel is like, this is really going to sound awful. It's like opening a business. It's like you got a whole operation to figure out. You go here, I go there. All that stuff. So I've been having it's been marvelous for me. I don't know about anybody else. It's writing stories. And I haven't written a story since high school. No one believes it. I never got interested. I mean, sure, I read all the great stories, I thought, when I was in graduate school, but it's such a different experience. And it's really, I just love it. I just love the challenge. So that's sort of the only thing I have to say about that. Oh, we got anonymous attendee. I love The Good Family Fitzgerald. How likely are you to write a sequel, please? Huh. Well, if you're a publisher or a an editor, I'd like to talk to you pretty soon. Um, well, that's very kind of you to say that. Thank you. I'm playing with it. I'm playing with the sequel.
Definitely a mini series in there, as I told you the other day. It's a mini series for anybody who hasn't read it and likes that kind of rich man, poor man sort of saga. It's a mini series on the page.
Okay, now I'm feeling good about that. All right, good idea. Carla, does an idea just come to you and you start writing, or how did this idea come to you for this book?
Um, I originally, a long time ago, conceived of it as a screenplay, and in fact, sort of pounded out an early draft that I then used as a very rough outline for the book. So I originally saw it cinematically, and then apropos of our conversation about enjoying getting deeper into her head, it was clear to me that it, at least for now, in this version, wanted to be a book so that we could really explore her more deeply. And that was the fun part.
Uh, uh, Talking about my process with this, when the first chapter didn't occur to me, well, actually, the fifth chapter was the opening chapter. This will make no sense to anybody except for writer's business. That was the beginning until I realized that wasn't the beginning. Uh, these two people were in bed, and I said that's not the right beginning. There's something that needs to happen later. And when I found that, okay, well that opened it up. I realized it was a whole new story. And then the entire last 50 pages, I I think I wrote that like a week. It just occurred to me I needed this. Um, so one of the pleasures and challenges of writing is being open to surprise. In fact, if you're not surprised by what your characters are doing or what you're doing,
Well,
uh,
we had very similar sort of parallel experiences with the ends of our books because um, I was given the suggestion. I thought had finished the book, and a couple of people read it, and someone said to me, "You should do an epilogue. I really want to know what happens to her a few years later." And that just kind of just took me to a whole other place with the characters, and then it even had a little bit of a ripple effect of going back and laying some groundwork. But yeah, I thought the book was finished, and it needed another 10 pages.
yeah, I find that the the real the, the the important writerly question is this in the right voice? Am I speaking? Is this a first person narrative? Is this a third person narrative? And when I'm stuck, I change it. I just say, well, okay, well, let's try this in the third person. I just wrote a story in the second person, which is kind of fun. And uh, I mean, that requires, that goes to the point I was trying to make a second ago that if you're not experimenting and trying and challenging stuff, it's kind of, what's the point?
Well, with Search Heartache, my other novel, I wrote the whole book in third person and was really stuck there for a very long time. And then when I suddenly realized it should be in the first person, all kinds of things opened up, and I think it just got much more deeply layered. So yeah, you have to do that now and then.
Yeah, the interesting thing
Also,
about in
it's also dangerous to listen to people. If someone says to you, "Oh, it should be in the first person," without giving you a good reason why, and you change the whole book, that's not necessarily the smart thing to do either.
yeah, people think first person is more honest or something, or more vulnerable or
More
whatever.
identifiable, I think.
I don't know. No, doesn't have to be.
No, it
The
doesn't.
I mean, for a family saga, uh, gee, I just can't. I almost did a spoiler. It's predominantly in the third person, and with each character, there was a way in which I was trying to get into a different kind of world. So that was the sort of Zen discipline, such as I have, which is not much, but to stay focused on being honest to what each character is doing and how each character is screwing up and how they interrelate with each other.
Right. And what I was sort of trying to get at before, I think, is that they, in your book, they do it unexpectedly, given the realm in which they exist, the mobster realm or the church realm. They screw up in the ways you might ascribe oppositely, you know? So that's fascinating.
That's good. I like that. That's good. So, what do we have left to talk about?
I think we've answered these questions. I see here, what is your favorite part about writing? My favorite part is not reading it through for the umpteenth time when you're preparing it for publication and you think, and you know it's going to be etched in stone this time. That is very nerve-wracking for me. The favorite part is when you just are in the moment and it's coming out, which for me during the pandemic has been a struggle, but I'm sort of hitting my stride a little bit again. But that's what we're there for, is that moment when you're not really conscious of what you're doing. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I would say the rare moments when you're writing and you're feeling like you're not there, that it's happening through you, these stories happening through you. It's a total illusion, it's a trick, but funny thing, it's not getting a big advance, it's not getting published, it's not getting other people to write a rave review. None of that stuff is the favorite part of writing. In fact, all that stuff makes me sad.
Well, somebody said to me just 2 days ago, apropos of the new book being out, so are you watching the numbers every day of how you're selling? And it hadn't even occurred to me. So yeah, no, that part is not fun. I
Yeah.
suppose it is. I mean, it never occurred to me.
Well, I think the key thing about one of the key aspects of being a writer is learning rejection. Well, that's in the movie business too. I mean, rejection is everywhere, right?
Big time. It wears
Yeah.
you down in the movie business. I don't miss it. I don't miss that at all. But also talking about with the writing, I used to write screenplays with my husband, and how we knew something was good is if neither one of us remembered writing it, or we both claimed writing it. you know?
Good.
So it is when it just comes from some other place.
You have a couple of questions here, Carla. I have a screenplay I'm thinking of rewriting as a middle grade novel. Any quick tricks or lessons learned you can give me?
I'm not seeing that. Read it one more time, Joe. I don't see it.
Scroll down. It's Carla. I have a screenplay I'm thinking of rewriting as a middle grade YA novel. Any quick tricks or lessons?
Well, when I first started writing screenplays, everybody told you to read a book by Sid Field. I don't know if he's still the guru. I doubt it. But it was helpful. It's a helpful book about structure. Very helpful. Any quick tricks or lessons? Oh, no, I'm sorry. You're turning a screenplay into a novel. Got it. Just that's what I did with Shine Until Tomorrow. Just use it as an outline. Think of it as an outline, as the sort of scaffolding upon which you build your novel. But if something's not working, if something's not true to where the story is taking you, let it go. And quick tricks,
No.
not really. This is not the kind of thing I necessarily do, but I know it works for a lot of people, just to make index cards of the scenes, and then you can shuffle them around or see what's redundant. But then you'll have everything in a certain kind of order.
And then, Carla, do you have an idea for your next novel, and do you know how it will end?
I'm working on my next novel. I hope maybe about halfway into it. That's a really interesting question, because up until about a week ago, I was sure I knew how it was going to end. And this week I haven't been quite so sure. So things are sort of going in their own place. I think it'll probably end where I expected, but it's going to be a little more of a circuitous route getting there than I had anticipated.
So that's all we have.
Well, thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Carla. That was a lot of fun. And thank you, everybody, Book Passage, for coming.
Thank you so much.
It was fun like last time. It was fun.
Great fun. And thanks to Book Passage. I wish we could be there in person.
That's right. Next year in Jerusalem.
Next year in the Ferry Building.
All right, so I guess we're done. Jen, are you jumping on here?
Yes, I am.
Ooh,
Whoa,
that was like,
talk about psychedelic from
I
this.
was gonna
Ooh,
say,
sorry
yeah.
about that.
Jen is microdosing. Okay.
No, I have two computers on at the same time. Alrighty, we will end this webinar. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Jen.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
See ya. Ciao, ciao.